So we're trying to give the power back to the senior, give the power back to the family. So they know exactly who is representing this family, and that it was the family's choice about how they're represented, if they are, even if they want it. And that if they change their mind at any point, even like moving day, that they can get out of it.
What if every time a family searched online for senior living, their information was secretly sold, locking them into contracts they never signed? That's happening right now across the country, and today's guest is one of the few who's standing up to change it.
Welcome to From Leads to Leases, a CCR growth podcast that helps senior living providers transform their complex challenges into opportunities. Listen in for stories from industry leaders, innovative strategies, and insights, and with our expertise, learn how to increase occupancy faster, guaranteed.
Welcome back to another episode of From Leads to Leases, the podcast that dives deep into the senior living and senior care industries, bringing you insights, strategies, and stories from the experts at the forefront of innovation, leadership, and care. I'm your host, Jerry Vinci, founder of CCR Growth, the only demand generation agency that is exclusive to the senior living industry. And through this podcast, I'm here to guide you through the evolving landscape of senior care, exploring the innovations, strategies, and leadership insights that are shaping the future of the industry. So whether you're a provider, a caregiver, or industry leader, this show is here to help you make informed decisions and create meaningful impact. All right. Today's guest is Erin Dwyer Busch, a certified senior advisor and licensed speech therapist who owns and operates Senior Care Authority of St. Louis. Since 2018, she and her team have guided families through one of the hardest decisions they'll ever make, finding the right care for their loved one. And her background in therapy, consulting, and placement gives her a rare 360-degree perspective on how our system actually works and where it fails. So today, Erin's advocacy extends beyond family support. She's helping lead legislative efforts as well in Missouri to bring transparency to online referral platforms and protect families from being exploited by misleading marketing practices. So Erin, welcome to the show. So glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Such an important topic. Obviously, I believe placement agents are the key to helping communities stay full and to help them find the right residents for their communities and not have to spin their wheels trying to work leads that are not necessarily good for the community. And then on the other side of that, the families themselves, it's a stressful situation for them. So working with them and making sure that they're only looking at the best options for them as well is really important.
Yeah, I think it's a win-win for everybody.
So I think to start, I want to talk a little bit about like when the system stops paying, but the family still needs help. We've talked a little bit about how your journey started outside of senior care. So you saw kind of firsthand how Medicare coverage gaps left families stranded. So what made you realize that so many families were falling through the cracks of the healthcare system?
So basically, it was just friends of mine who knew what my background was in speech therapy, and their parents, maybe they had a stroke or some other kind of health event, and they were given, the typical occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech therapy. And then at some point, it sort of stopped. And so it was either because they were doing too well or they weren't doing well enough, or it just, came to an end. And so the families were wanting to keep going on that momentum with, oh, well, dad's doing well in speech therapy. We hate to stop. We don't want to lose ground. We don't want him to stagnate. And so they would come to me and say, hey, we'll pay you privately since Medicare is no longer covering those sessions. Would you consider that? And I said, sure. So I started working with some friends' parents, and I realized, one, because I didn't realize the payor source, how that worked. I wasn't privy to Medicare or any of that. We learned a lot about how that system works and the coding and things like that. But also just fell in love with working with seniors. I'd mostly work with pediatrics, adolescents, things like that. But this was really my first time focusing on seniors, and I realized that that's a great, population. So that's how that kind of came about. And then also a friend of mine, her mother was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia, and the caregiving spouse passed away suddenly. And so then they were left scrambling for care. So what do we do? There was an income situation where she didn't have enough money to pay for care privately 24/7. So that left it to Medicaid, which Medicaid doesn't cover 24/7 at home. So they didn't want a facility and they just scrambled around and ended up hiring some agencies, and some of those didn't work out. And when I asked her how she vetted them, are they bonded, licensed, insured? What's their dementia training? She just sort of looked at me like deer headlights. And I said, "Oh my, you didn't vet them, you didn't interview them." And she said, "No, I literally Googled and took one of the top two places." And so that made me realize families don't know what they don't know, and they're in too deep. They're too connected to that situation to go through the process and do all the steps necessary because they're busy and they're emotionally drained. And so having that neutral third party help them through it, I said, "Oh, okay, there's a need for that." So those two situations really is what got me to Senior Care Authority and doing placement and consulting.
Thank you for sharing all that. I've been in marketing for almost 3 decades, and through my agency, I've helped some of the largest senior living providers attract qualified leads and fill rooms faster while lowering their acquisition costs. But one thing kept bothering me. While working with larger communities, I kept meeting smaller operators, 10 to 50 bed communities that were struggling to compete with the big box providers because they don't have the same budget, staffing, or support behind them. And as a small business owner myself, I get that. You're wearing 5 different hats, you're trying to fill rooms while still giving great care, and that's exactly why we built Growthly. Growthly takes everything we've learned from helping large operators fill their buildings and makes it accessible to smaller communities without retainers, without long-term contracts or inflated costs. It's a performance-based partnership, and you only pay when we deliver move-ins. We help you stand out online, stop depending on referral agencies, bring in qualified families, and fill your community faster. Growthly is built for your small community and designed for big results. Learn more at growthlyseniorliving.com. It's amazing to me that our system is built in a way that there's this improvement standard. Like if you improve too much, you're no longer eligible, or it blows me away. I mean, there was a data point by AARP that said like nearly 25% of older adults lose access to therapy services prematurely due to Medicare's improvement standard, leaving families to seek private care or navigate
Huge.
options alone. That's crazy to me.
Mm. Wow.
Wow.
And it happens in the younger populations too. We saw that when I worked for First Steps, which is our early intervention program. So it's birth to 3 or 4 years old. I noticed as I was progressing through the system, it became harder and harder for kids to qualify. You had to be really severe to be able to qualify for free services. And I'm thinking, why do we keep raising the bar? And it had to do with funding and staffing. And I mean, that whole system was a mess of its own. They wanted a speech therapist to be the primary if the speech needs were the primary need. So say occupational therapy was a secondary, they had some fine motor concerns, but the main concern was speech. They wanted the speech therapist to do some of the occupational therapy work and exercises. And I said, I don't feel comfortable with that. I am not an OT. And so I ended up quitting, but I see what they were doing. I understand the reasoning behind it. It was, well, we want to pay fewer people because our program is not being funded, but yeah, it became harder and harder to qualify. So many families fell through the cracks. So young and the older population and all in between, it affects all of them and all the families.
For sure, yeah. I want to talk about Senior Care Authority specifically because it's a franchise. It's nationwide, which is really great that you were able to find the organization and then to start your own brand. What do you franchise branch? How do you guys describe it?
Franchise, yeah, I own my own
Yeah.
franchise and have a territory
Okay.
in Greater St. Louis.
Without having really that business experience, and especially like stepping into this new space of being a placement advisor, what did those early days teach you about balancing the care ethics with the business realities? Because the two often don't go hand in hand.
And that was quite a transition for me, not having to deal with collecting money ever before, working in a school or for a nonprofit or a government organization. I never had to deal with payment. So I would say that Senior Care Authority did a great job with the training part. So you're meeting other franchise owners, you're learning from them. You're learning how to do placement, you're learning how to do consulting, and then at the same time they're requiring you to go and get these higher level designations and credentials. So certified senior advisor, so CSA was one of them. So going through that program and then becoming a CDP, certified dementia practitioner, those are all required from our franchise that they want us to have, which is a great idea. So we have this background. So we have all this education. You have to go through all these background checks and ethical clearances and all of this stuff. So that helped definitely with that piece. But then when you're actually with the client and you're like, okay, now I got to talk about how we get paid. And, maybe this is a consulting client. And so I'm going to have to actually ask for a retainer or payment. It was very awkward in the beginning, especially when they're going through something and they just lost their parent and they're trying to find care for their other parent. It doesn't feel natural to do that. So you do it in a very subtle, nice way, basically by giving them options. Okay, you can do this on your own and I can teach you how to do it. And here you go. Or if you want me to handhold you through this process, then that's going to be, a fee for service, or this is how we get paid as a placement person. So it just got easier. And of course, having a client engagement letter and a process, and which is what that franchise taught me, but also talking to other franchise owners on how they do things. So I basically took ideas from each one of them and kind of made my own plan and my own routine. And so that helps to have those steps that you go through with each client. And so obviously you treat them individually because they're going through something different. Each family dynamic is different, but in terms of how the business plan is and the business sequence, having that set up and in place, it becomes easier to do and talk about money and, get paid at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's a great way for someone who necessarily hasn't been in this space before to get their feet wet, so to speak, but to also have the support of other franchisee owners as well as the overall organization to help you navigate some of those challenging pieces of a business. It's a business, but it's also helping people find a home for a parent or a loved one and in an emotional complex situation. So that's a lot
For
to try
sure.
to
At the end of the day,
juggle at
it's
the
a
same
helping
time.
profession.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you are helping families, so it's just that it's in, a business, scenario, but yeah, it gets easier with time, and I also hired, business coaches too, to help me with all of the different, scenarios and, to make sure, okay, is this really what I'm doing? Is this the best course of action? Does this make the most sense? Because I didn't have a business background, so I learned a lot in those first couple years. I learn every day, but hiring those professionals and talking and having mentors too that have already done it, and learning from them has been key.
Was having a conversation with someone outside the industry yesterday about this because they were kind of looking at it from a business investor standpoint, looking in, and I was trying to explain to them, you can't look at this like a real estate transaction, like it's a housing transaction. You actually have to look at it like it's somebody getting diagnosed with an illness of some kind because it involves the entire family. Usually it's coming out of left field. They haven't planned for it or talked about it before. And so now everyone's having to scramble to make some pretty tough decisions that are going to impact, not only the person who got the diagnosis, but everyone else in the family is going to be impacted by this somehow, whether it's financially, whether it's, where this person ends up living, all of those things. So it's far more complex than people realize, I think.
100%. And it's interesting you bring up the real estate situation because I have these conversations with referral partners. And if the referral partner, whether it be a real estate agent or a financial advisor or an attorney, if they're just simply going to be transactional with my client, then that's not a good fit for me because these seniors and their families are going through a very hard situation. This isn't a first time home buyer and they're all excited and they're going to have a baby. This is somebody that maybe is having to sell their house because their spouse died and now they need money for their care. So you need to treat them appropriately. You need to be patient. You cannot be rushing the sale, trying to close the deal. You're going to turn them off. And so if they are going to be like that, then I can't refer to them. And so it's a conversation we have and we try to educate our referral partners too, that we all really need to be sensitive to the families that are going through this because they need to be treated in a certain way with dignity and patience and to be handheld. And
Mhm.
this isn't just a business transaction.
Are there any ways that the franchise model hinders your ability to kind of operate the way you want to operate, or do you feel like it's been mostly helpful?
And having never owned another franchise before, I can't obviously compare, but I do talk to other franchise owners, so I know that there's differences. I have to say our franchise really does a good job of saying, "Okay, here's our marketing collateral. If you have suggestions, we're gonna take them into consideration. Here's basically how we do contracts or things like that." But they're very open to our suggestion, and you're pretty much free to run your business, how you want within, of course, the constraints of ethics and the service industry and things. But if you look at the different franchisees in our franchise, we all kind of do it a little differently. There's lots of couples that run it. There's business partners that run it. There's singleton that run it. And then there's people like me who are one person that own it, but then they have a team that works for them. So you see it all, and it all works because they have different markets, and people have different work ethics, or some people just want to do it all like, it's not going to be done right if you don't do it yourself. I tried that at first, but it's a lot of work. And if you want to grow and expand, and for me, if you want to focus on certain things within your franchise, then this team approach allows me to do that. I can focus on education in our driving program and consulting, whereas my team can focus on placement. And that's what works for me. And I love having a group of women that have various backgrounds, but we can talk and say, okay, I've hit a wall here. What's another option? Can you help me think through this? And you're like, oh, thank you. I never thought about that. So to me, you're getting four heads are better than one. You're getting four, opinions and four ideas, and not just mine. So I know I'm limited, and it's four are better than one.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great way to look at it, and I can imagine that. Even just the fact that they require you to get those certifications to be able to be a franchisee holder, I think that says a lot about the organization itself. So I love that.
And they also required us to be part of NPRA, so the National
Okay.
Placement and Referral Alliance. So
That's
that's
great.
another, ethical standards. You have to go through background checks. So they want us try to equalize the playing field, that we're all doing these services, but we need to be under the same ethical standards, background standards. So I appreciate that that's something that they require us to do, and it makes me feel better too to be like, oh, I have all of these different credentials and education, and I'm also people are looking at me and making sure I toe the line. Not that I wouldn't anyway, but it makes the families feel better that, okay, it's not just the base, oh, okay, you went and took a 1 hour course, but it's like, no, you have continuing education and background checks and all of these things. It makes them feel better about who they're doing business with and who their mom or dad is meeting with.
That's actually kind of the dark underbelly of the senior living industry, or senior care industry, I think, is like, I love that about your organization and just placement advisors in general. They tend to be very well educated because they have to be, right? Because they've established these connections with all the local communities. Whereas you look at like an in-home care agency, they're the amount of qualifications or certifications that they need to operate are so few and far between. It's almost scary. I was having a conversation with one. They're like, yeah, as long as you're a real person, like, and you fill out the application, you can basically open up a caregiving, as long as you're not doing medical care. If
Wow.
you're just doing like, yeah, just helping people with,
Non-medical. Okay.
yeah, non-medical, it's kind of scary how the standards are, there really isn't a standard there. So yeah, kind of
So, yeah,
crazy.
I'm thankful for that. We do have,
Yeah,
standards and that kind of
absolutely.
thing. So, business licenses and, LLCs, and you have to go through that whole process to even get started. So,
Yeah. So talking about the impact of the silver tsunami, we've all heard this term a thousand times now. Everybody's talking about it. Doing the research, I mean, it's not necessarily going to be an overnight. I think tsunami is a little bit of a dramatic term just because it's like a slow burn. It's between now
right.
and 2044 essentially that we're going to see this increase in the number of older adults every year. Um, I think I was looking at the data. It said something like there's going to be roughly 20 million additional seniors by 2040, or over the age of 65, than there are right now. There's like 58 point, what was it, 58.3 million now, and there's going to be 78 million in 2040. So we have a significant increase, but the biggest number that I see is in the 85 plus population, it's supposed to increase by 111%. So it's supposed to more than double. So I think that's interesting because,
Statistically significant.
yeah, but we're seeing that people are waiting far longer to move into any kind of senior living. They're missing the window for independent living typically, and the average age of, someone moving into assisted living I think it's at like it's almost 85 years old now. So I mean, what are
It's
you
almost 85.
yeah, what are you seeing in St. Louis when it comes to timing and readiness to move?
Seeing those same things, people are waiting longer to move. 99% of the people want to stay in their home, and I understand. I understand that. But then they're moving into communities, missing that independent living window and sometimes the assisted living window and having to go to memory care or skilled nursing. You're not utilizing the building and the amenities and being as social and mobile, using the gym and the pool and all of that kind of things. That's what we're trying to educate families to say, I know it's daunting to leave a house you've lived in for 40, 50, 60 years. We're going to help you with that. But these are the benefits of staying at home. These are the benefits of moving and, basically laying out a plan and saying it is your choice, but these are the pros and cons. And so there's definitely, pros to moving before you actually need all of the care. So that's there in case, but you have all those amenities on site. So, for example, if you can't drive at night anymore, or maybe you're not even really driving a lot because your vision, but everything else, you're very and vibrant. Moving to a community, all of that is there. They have transportation. You don't even have to leave your building if you don't want to. And you can meet with the ladies for coffee, or you can join the men's club, and they have educational speakers coming in. So you're moving your body in the gym, you're, stimulating your mind in those educational seminars. And so you're doing all those things instead of staying at home, because I always say, okay, you want to stay at home. They're staying at home and aging in place well and successfully, and not so much. So what are you doing during the day? Well, I sleep until noon, and then I have breakfast, and then I watch TV, and then maybe I call my daughter, and then I have dinner, watch TV, and go to bed. And that's it, and they haven't gotten outside the house, and they haven't been really stimulated. And so, you're having those discussions with families about what does your daily routine look like, and can we amp that up either by bringing people in or moving you to a community. So definitely seeing that people are waiting. They're waiting until something happens. It could be a crisis, or it
Good
could
point.
just be an incident, a health situation. And so then that's when there's, oh, okay, well, now we have to move. And then we always tell families, look, can we help you in crisis? Absolutely. But your choices are going to be fewer. You may not get the your top choice because, again, there's probably a waiting list. So that early planning is so essential to, this is my top choice, this is my second choice. Okay, well, let's get you on the waiting list for that 2-bedroom you want, which overlooks the courtyard. And put you on that waiting list, and not waiting until that crisis, and then you're scrambling because you have a medical event, and then you have to figure out rehab, and are you going to be able to walk on that hip now? So yes, I'm definitely seeing that same trend that you're seeing, where people are waiting, in my opinion, too long. If they're going to move, they're waiting too long to make that move.
I feel like, you know, uh, the industry overall might have missed its moment because there was this whole mindset around and a stigma around senior living that it was all nursing homes, right? And no one wanted to move in because it was a nursing home. Then this industry has tried to shift the narrative. It's tried to market to a younger audience and tried to change it to resort style living and 24/7 dining and amenities left and right. And swimming pools and all these other things that sound great on paper, but
It's like a cruise ship.
realistically,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. The
Yeah.
cruise ship on land. And I love that concept, but at the same time, you know, less than 10% of the entire available population that could move into senior housing moves in. So over 90% of the population doesn't move into senior housing. So we're clearly not winning the battle in terms of the marketing and convincing people that moving in earlier makes sense. So now that we're looking at it from if people really are waiting until they're 85, what does that look like now? Like we have to kind of shift that narrative around how we're talking about senior living. It's all about safety, security, peace of mind, because it's going to be the adult children that are making that choice now. And I'm sure you're seeing that more so than, speaking
Yes.
with the older adults directly themselves.
Correct. Absolutely.
Interesting.
Yes. When they want independent living, when they're moving at like 70, they are the ones making the decision. But, mom fell and broke a hip and now needs, memory care or skilled nursing. It's the daughter that's really making the decision. So again, if you are planning And having those conversations early, you have more autonomy too, and more direction in where you end up living. If you plan early enough, have those conversations with your kids, but you're planning early enough to actually make your own choices instead of having to, rely on your kids. So that's another important factor. And I'm also seeing, and I don't know if this is everywhere else, but I've met with some CCRCs, or continuum of care retirement communities, who've told me that people don't want skilled nursing, which I understand that. So they're cutting their skilled nursing beds, their long-term skilled nursing beds, keeping their rehab, but they're minimizing their long-term skilled nursing beds and having more assisted living because they want to age in place in their assisted living apartment. So they're trying to bring more of the medical model into the assisted living apartment. And I thought that was interesting. So that's something that I've been told by a couple different places here in St. Louis. So I don't know if you've heard that, but that was eye-opening.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, again, the whole nursing home model slash stigma that people have around it, I think they want to try to avoid that type of experience as much as possible. And yeah, I mean, aging in place, if I were to move into a community, I definitely would want that experience of like knowing that if this is the place I choose to move, this is the place I want to stay. I don't want to have to go
Right.
somewhere else
Absolutely.
ever. Yeah. I want to talk about the Family Choice Act. This is kind of the heart of your story, and I think it's so amazing what you guys are doing to try to combat some of the large referral agencies out there that are kind of acting in a predatory manner, in my opinion, towards older adults and their families. Tell me, for those who are unfamiliar, what exactly does the Family Choice Act propose?
Sure. So we took our language, so our House Bill 390, that we're in, I think we're in our third or fourth session now. We based it or modeled it after the Colorado Family Choice Act, which passed several years ago. So they're one of very few states where some legislation like this has passed. Basically, what it is, it's about transparency and consumer protection for seniors online. So it's kind of got three different parts to it, but we have, how do placement or people that get money from finding a community for an older adult, how do they get paid? So that's the transparency part. We have the family that goes online, or could be the senior themselves that goes online and unknowingly is entered into an agreement, or they're being represented by these online agencies, and their information is being shared or sold. And so then all of a sudden they're getting all these calls from these communities and they want out. And so we're trying to help them get out of those. And so we're requiring more paperwork on my end, on anybody's end. Anybody that has a older adult that they're finding senior living for and getting paid for by the community or facility, we want it to be very transparent, and we want written records that that client and their family is okay with that they're okay with me representing them, they're okay with the online agency representing them, knowing how we get paid, and that if they're not and they change their mind at any point, even like moving day, that they can get out of it with them or with us. It also protects, at least in our state, it protects the senior living communities as well. So a lot of times they're afraid of recourse from the bigger online companies and being sued. So they will pay out to the online agency regardless of how much or how little work they did. So even if a company like mine was working with the senior and helping them with the move, helping them by going on tours, providing the family support, sitting down with them at the lease signing and all of that, if their name is in the system with one of the online agencies, the communities have to pay them as well. And so even if the family
Crazy.
doesn't want that to happen. So we're trying to protect the community and say you only have to pay out one referral fee, and the family gets to decide who that is. Give the power back to the senior, give the power back to the family. So that's the other side of that coin. There are a lot of, class action lawsuits out there where families and seniors, their information has been shared and they didn't give permission, or they didn't know they gave permission, because filling out a form with their email address and or phone number and name isn't a signature. You're not signing anything, but that's how it's being viewed. And so we're just trying to change that, is that the family needs to full well know, what does this mean when I click this box or put my name in, and I should have the ability to get out of that if I want.
So the bill not only is improving upon like the disclosures that have to be out there in terms of the working relationship, but also giving families and communities a way to get out of that system if they are put into that system, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And there's going to be a monetary penalty if those rules aren't followed. But there's going to be paperwork that both parties are privy to and filling out, and then the senior community will have on file for years. So they know exactly who is representing this family and that it was the family's choice. Hence the Family Choice Act.
Yeah. Without that in place, how does it work? I mean, if somebody wants to opt out, if somebody finds out their information is in that system and they didn't sign up for it or they no longer want to be in that system, how would they go about opting out?
Right now in our state, they can fill out an opt-out form. They can either go to the websites themselves and Google search opt-out, or I do have a copy I can give to, say it's my client, and they're like, I don't want to deal with this online company anymore. I can give them the opt-out form, but they have to fill it out. They have to reach out to that company themselves. I can't do it. And they may or may not let them out of that. They may or may not honor that. It's always worth a try. Find out if that actually goes through is when we go back to the community and say, okay, what does your system say for Mr. Smith now? Does it say that he was opted out of the online agency's representation or not? And they will tell me yay or nay. So unfortunately, that's very frustrating to families. If they do this legwork, they call and say, take me out, take me off your, your call list, take me off of your website list, your email list, and they don't. What's the recourse for that family? Shouldn't they have the ability to say, I don't want you to call me anymore. I want you to take my name out of your system. You're not representing me anymore. But right now, without the bill, there's not a lot we can do. It's up to the discretion of the online companies whether or not they accept that opt-out form and that phone call from the
How
senior or
is
their
that
family.
possible though? If somebody is actively reaching out to say, I don't want to be contacted anymore, how can they just not say okay and take them out of the system? In what
It's
scenario
kind of
would
like
they
the
be
do not
like, eh,
call list.
yeah,
Well, so from what I've learned, and I'm not a lawyer and I don't claim to know everything about this situation. From what I've been told, the loophole for the online companies is that they call themselves a marketing company. They don't call themselves a referral agency or a placement company. So that's the loophole. So this then becomes a consumer protection, which is why there's been lawsuits that have been settled by them. They've lost and they've settled because there is something there. And the do not call list sometimes works, sometimes don't. And so it falls within that kind of gray area. Is this a consumer protection violation? And throughout the United States, they have found that it is. But for the lay person, they are not going to do a lawsuit, because they're going to have to hire a lawyer and it's time consuming and it's cumbersome and it's expensive. So that's probably why they just end up giving up saying, well, I'm not going to, sue them. So my recourse is I'm just stuck in the system with them having my name for 2 to 5 years. But the problem is, even if 5 years goes by or it's getting close to that 5-year mark or whatever, if that online company reaches out again and makes contact and you respond to the email or you pick up the phone, it resets again. So then we have another 2 to 5 years you're being represented. So then it's also trying to get in front of the families and saying, okay, don't answer that phone call, delete that email, don't respond, because if it could just be, hi, how are you doing? Oh, I'm just checking to make sure mom's alive. Well, that's another touch. That's another, and it resets their ability to represent you.
that's insane that that is a thing. I mean, where are you at in the process of getting this passed into law?
Well, last year we got past the House and it got to the Senate. Unfortunately, it died on the Senate floor. We ended up in an omnibus bill, which we thought would help us. There unfortunately was a conflict of interest. It came down to basically one person. So there was a conflict of interest. The opposing lobbyists, they actually ended up with 4 in Missouri, but the Missouri representative for one of the bigger online referral companies had a conflict of interest because he was a good friend of a senator. And so the senator who originally backed our bill and said, oh, I'm all for protecting seniors, flipped and said, oh, I can't support this bill as it is because of this person being very close to her, family friend. And so she redlined our bill and basically said the only way it would pass is if you take out this and this and this. And so it was watered down. There was a shell of a bill. And so it couldn't pass like that. And so, we basically said we can't pass this. We can't go further. Not that it would have been passed anyway, but so we're trying again. We have amended the language, and so we're hoping in 2026 that it will pass. But it's just frustrating to get so far and you think you got it, and then one person derails it, and you're just it just, it's a bipartisan bill. So I just don't understand. We're not putting anyone out of business. We're not trying to affect anyone's, income. It is purely to support the seniors and their families, bring transparency, and to let them have choice about how they're represented if they are, even if they want it. So I just don't understand what's the negative. I mean,
Yeah.
if you look at Colorado, those referral agencies are doing just fine with that bill having been passed years ago. So it doesn't affect business. It adds another layer, a couple extra paperwork steps that they have to do. But isn't that worth it to protect seniors and their families and have them feel autonomous and heard? I think so.
I agree. I think so as well. I think, just the way that whole system works once that data is captured is kind of scary that, you have so little control over what happens with it next and who owns what. And that impacts everybody, the family, the
Right.
placement advisors, and then the communities themselves. So,
Correct.
everybody kind of loses out in that scenario. I mean,
Absolutely.
what are the downstream effects that happen for communities when they get tangled up with a referral agency?
So, from my knowledge, they have to pay. I think it's an annual. They have a contract, but I don't know how often it's renewed. But they're paying some kind of annual fee to be represented on these online referral companies. So they're paying kind of a directory fee, and then they're also paying when they get a lead. And I've heard they're also paying. They're going to be charging per lead now, whether or not that lead converts. That's something they're trying. I've been told it's $100 a lead, no matter if that client converts or not. So they're charging when there's a placement, but they're also charging a fee to just be in their system. So they're, being doubly charged, but they're getting a high volume. So that's something that I can't compete with. I have a small business, so I have, two websites, not like 400. So there are going to get a good volume of leads at that community. But the problem is they're not qualified leads. They're not quality leads. So the marketers at these senior living communities are spending so much extra time on leads that aren't going to lead to closed business. So where we're different is we will qualify those leads. So by the time I reach the marketer, I already know how much money they have. Are they going to have to get on Medicaid? What is their medical situation? What's their social situation? So if they're going to be getting on Medicaid in a year, I'm never going to bring them to a community that doesn't accept Medicaid.
Yeah,
That's
it'd be
just
crazy.
silly. Or move them to a community where it's too far for their children to come visit. So we talk about geography and, where does it make the most sense? And also we're protecting the seniors' data. So I'm the liaison between the family and the senior community. So until they give me permission to share their name and phone number or email address, I'm not going to share it. So that's also another added layer of protection that the online companies are not. So with all the data breaches going on, that makes me think, well, their information is sitting out there in their database, whereas it's not with ours until we actually place them. So I am not going to give your information away to a community or a marketer until I have express permission from that client. And so that's another, thing that we do differently from the online folks.
That's such a great point too. I think the fact that you're kind of creating that extra layer of protection because that's, even if a family reaches out to a community directly, now they're potentially putting themselves in the line of fire with a whole bunch of
Correct.
marketing, emails, phone calls, and,
Yeah.
they may not want to have to deal with all that. So if you're keeping them shielded from that, I think that's pretty awesome, especially
Right.
because you're often like weighing options between a couple communities. It's not just one community. So
Correct.
I think that's pretty great. I love that.
We're the gatekeepers, yeah. And we give them options, yeah, and not just options we're contracted with either. The online lead folks, they will only show the client or the potential client the places they have contracts with, whereas we won't. There's so many times we've taken folks to senior communities that we don't have a contract with, we consider them out of network. And so how that works is because if that's the best fit, we want them to move there, whether we're paid or not at the end of the day. So talk to the community and say, okay, you're considered out of network because you won't contract with us for whatever reason. A lot of times it's just a corporate thing that they just don't contract. So if the family ends up choosing that one, then we have the discussion and say, okay, well, then this turns into consulting. So would you be open to a one-time contract? And if not, would you at least reimburse the family the amount that they're going to have to pay me for my services. And I have yet to get a no. So hopefully, but it doesn't happen very often. That also opens up the amount of choices for the family as well, because we're not just showing them the places we have contracts with, which are a lot of them. We are contracted with most of them, but it just, we don't even think about it. We're like, whatever's the best fit is where we're going to be showing you. So, and then that also leads into another problem is that the Washington Post had shown that 37.5% of some of these online lead agencies have serious violations. So the communities that they have as their recommended list, almost 38%
the
of
best in
them,
senior living.
the best of whatever, what does that take to get there? But the best of lists that they have and they're giving to their families,
That's so
they're almost
crazy.
38% of those have serious violations on their state reports. So we scour those reports for our families and we tell them what's going on at these communities. We've been in them because we're local. So, there's no local person right now in my area that's from these online agencies. So that means they're not going on tours with the people. They're not in these buildings. They don't have a pulse on what's really going on. And so to me, that's why just choose local. Whether it's me or my competitor, please just choose a local, advisor. That's what we tell families. Do your research online, but just don't fill out anything. If you have to fill out a form in order to find out how much this community is, if they have openings, don't do it. Go through us or just call and ask. But if they ask for your information, just say, I prefer not to give my information. I just want to know how much it is to move here. Do you have any openings?
The fact that they're calling themselves marketing agencies and not referral agencies, I think is interesting because I know like some of the largest out there, they only represent about 70% of the communities and probably even less than that, but roughly 70%, let's say. So there's 30% of the communities that they're not showcasing on their websites. So I know one of them is under investigation by the Senate Special Committee on Aging because of that, because they're not giving a full picture. They're not showing families all of their options. They're only showing them some of their options and only the options that they get paid for. So how's that ethical to only show the communities that at the end of the day, if someone moves into, you're going to get paid for? That's just not the way it should work. You'd also talked
Absolutely.
about them sending unqualified leads. I mean, what makes those leads unqualified? Is it just because they're not fully aware of like, everything that potential prospect has happening in their space, so they don't know all the details, so it may not be a good fit for the community, or
Correct.
is there something else?
They haven't done a full deep dive. They fully listen to the senior or their family. And a prime example of this is one of my senior care advisors on my team. She was working with a family, and one of the family members went online and got tangled up in one of these companies. And my senior care advisor said, I understand. That's not a big deal. We'll figure it out. Would you mind sending me the list of their recommendations? She said, sure. So she got the email and she's looking through the list and she says, are you kidding me? The place where the client was living was one of the suggestions. He's already there. So how is that helpful? We see it all the time with they need to get on Medicaid, they're low income, and they're being sent to a place there's no way they can afford, or they could only afford it for like 3 months. That doesn't make sense. Geography is another big one. So we're asking, okay, so who are the key players here? We've got the power of attorney is the daughter, the oldest daughter. We've got a son and we got another daughter. The one daughter lives in Chicago. The power of attorney is here. But the daughter maybe lives 25 minutes away. Okay, so are we moving mom to live by daughter? Or do we want to keep mom where she's used to, even though she's not really driving and everything? So we have those conversations. No, it makes more sense to move mom towards daughter. Well, a lot of these unqualified leads, the geography can be an hour or more away.
Wow.
So why, if the family is an hour and 15 minutes away, why would they be looking at this community? It just doesn't make sense. Again, they haven't listened to the family and the client and what their needs are. They're just putting them in a little box and saying, okay, well, these are the places we have contracts with, and we're going to just send them to those 5. It's like, no, that's not how we work. We do the reverse. We go, okay, what does the family want? How much money do they have? What kind of planning is there? Are they going to have to get on Medicaid? Their medical and social needs. And then we start the process. And so we narrow it down based on all of those things. So it's kind of backwards, basically. So those marketers are then finding out after a conversation, after tracking down the family, that we're not even a fit, which we don't even let them get to that point. We don't even let them get their name until it's a good fit. So
Hmm.
we're providing not only a service to the family, but a service to the community to try to help them with qualified leads. But then they're not going to be wasting their time. And also during the tour, before the tour, I've given them paragraphs on what the family needs, what they're looking for, so that they can tailor the tour for exactly what the family needs. So, for example, Mrs. Smith loves to swim. She absolutely loves to swim. You guys have 2 pools. So please highlight the fact that you have aqua aerobics in the pool every morning, that you have 2 pools. Or Mr. Smith is really afraid of heights. So please don't take him on, a level above 4 in your building. Stick to the ground floor in the first and second. So things like that to help them be more successful with their touring, and to really get to know the family so that they feel heard as well.
Given the challenges with with the current compensation model, I mean, do you think the industry is going to eventually move towards a fee for service model where you're essentially charging the family instead of getting paid on the back end?
If we don't pass our bill in Missouri, I'm fearful if that's what's going to happen. If we're not able to completely represent our family to the finish line because they accidentally went online or purposely went online and can't get out of that agreement or representation, then I don't know how else we can, you know, survive. How can we proceed then? So in my opinion, that's, I believe, where we're going unless that bill is passed. So and it's unfortunate, but I'm also seeing communities being penalized almost for using people like us. And if they're having to pay out such a high portion to these online lead folks that are giving them, I don't know. I mean, I've heard rates of 2 to 5% are closing from those online leads. So they're not the best qualified leads. So if they're making all the money and we're not, it's, how do you reconcile that? So it's challenging. And I don't want those marketers to be affected. I think the CEOs and the owners of these buildings should know that it's not fair to penalize your salespeople, your marketing people, for us, especially us being involved, because we're helping them. We're trying to help them with the client. We're trying to help them through the whole process, make it easier, and bring them qualified leads. So if you're docking their pay or something like that, or it just doesn't seem fair to me. So if that doesn't go away, if we don't pass our bill, I don't know what's the other recourse except to have to charge families, which I don't want to have to do for placement.
Yeah, there was a senior care report that came out in 2024 that said that there's been a 47% increase in families paying for independent senior care consulting in the last 3 years. So I think that's interesting. I mean, I think some families, and I know this, I've heard this from other placement advisors before, that there are some families out there that are skeptical of the current compensation model because they feel like, oh, well, what if this placement advisor is just showing me these communities because they know that they're going to make the most money off of that move in versus, somewhere else that might be more cost friendly. I would imagine that's probably not true. That's probably just an unmitigated fear that people have because it's just new. This is a whole new experience for them. I mean, from your experience as a placement advisor, how often have you heard that concern from people?
Personally, I think only twice. So one of my first placement clients, it was the son that said, "Well, how do I know you're not just going to take me to my mom to the most expensive place you earn the most money?" And I was so taken aback because that's not how I operate or even think. I'm like, well, I have so many contracts in my mind, I don't even know at what percentage or I'm like, no, that's not even how I think. But I told him, I said, look, if you want references, I have references, can give that to you. You can see my background, how many ethical courses I had to go through, how many background checks that I'm vetted. I couldn't get to where I am if I'm not, all these certifications. I said, but at the end of the day, it's not my choice where your mom moves. I said, I bring you options. We go tour them, but you and your mom are the ones that are making the decision. So you're in control. But if the families really feel uncomfortable with how we're paid, well, guess what? We can pivot. We can do this consulting. The family at the end of the day, and my company has a choice. We can do placement as a consulting service, fee for service from the family. So you're in control of exactly how much I'm getting paid and how many hours,
Mhm.
or we can charge the community. So whichever one you feel more comfortable, again, you're in control, you make the choice. And so the gentleman was like, oh, okay. I mean, and the question was never brought up again. So it's very rare. And I think because they know how we work and that we can pivot and do the consulting. But with the online companies, you don't have a choice. So it's only one model, and you don't know how many places they have contracts with, which with us, we're very transparent, and we'll tell you that one's out of network and this is how it works. This one's in network. But again, it's your choice at the end of the day where you move. We've let you know everything about each community. We have, basically like a chart comparing them, pros and cons for each one. But we're educating you, we're guiding you, but you make the final decision, and you have all the tools and resources to make that informed decision at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's probably an unfounded fear that people have, but it's also interesting that we're seeing that large 47% increase in people paying upfront directly rather than, going the other route. So that is interesting. That is very interesting to me. So I think the last question or area of discussion for us, I think, would just be kind of talking about building better partnerships with the communities themselves. How do you think communities and local advisors can work together to ensure residents stay longer and thrive? Because I think that that's probably one of the baseline numbers that most communities or operators are looking at in terms of the how well their community is doing is the length of stay. Are people staying as long as possible? Are they leaving early? If so, why is that happening? And so obviously I think finding the right fit for each person is such a vital part of that. And that's the role that you play. So how do you think that you can help work together to improve that over time?
It starts with doing the placement right in the first place. So finding the right community for that particular person, knowing and being able to see ahead. So again, not only monetarily, are they going to run out of money? Are they going to have to get on Medicaid? And can that community still fit for their needs, but also care needs? So if mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, say 4 years ago, and the communities we're looking at can't even accommodate memory care needs, that's silly to me. It's like, well, then you're just setting her up to fail and she's going to have to move again. So again, making sure it's the right fit, doing your due diligence with the family, thinking ahead, talking with the community. I always tell the communities, please be honest. If we're going to be transparent. I always tell families, please do not try to hide anything. Oh, dad's an alcoholic. I don't think I should tell the community. Guess what? They're going to find
Yes,
out.
you should.
It's better to tell them now than for them to ask your dad to leave. If it's a diagnosis, if it's a medical need or something, it's going to be in the notes. It's going to be found out. It's not going to be hidden. So let's just be transparent with the community. And then with the community, I'm talking and I say, okay, reading through their notes, is there anything concerning in there? I would rather have them tell me no now than to accept a client, move them in, and then in 5 months go, oh, we can't handle this, or for whatever reason, he has to move out. So that's not success. But communication to me is number one. So communicating before the move-in, during the move-in, after the move-in. So what I tell the families and I tell the communities is that we're the liaison. So I see the community side. I don't work for the community, but I can see their side and their points, and I know their licensure. But I also see the families and their needs. And so we're managing expectations, and we're giving the families the questions to ask, challenging the communities on something that they promised, but working together to say, okay, how can this be a good fit? So once the client moves in, if there's an issue, let's have a care plan meeting. Let's set up a phone call with the director of nursing or the assistant director of nursing or the executive director. Let's try to figure this out, because sometimes it is the family that there's something concerning, but when you talk to them about it, they misunderstood or they expected something to happen that's not within their care plan. And sometimes it's the community. Maybe they overpromised and underdelivered, or maybe it was, they admitted this person at a care level, but then maybe there was a medical, event. And so now this person needs higher level of care. And the family's thinking, oh my gosh, I'm being swindled. All of a sudden my care level went from 1 to 3. And you're trying to explain and educate that there's a reason for that. Your dad fell and now he needs help with X, Y, and Z. and that wasn't covered under the original, service plan. So you're in the middle saying, I want everyone to be happy, and I'm trying to make it transparent for everybody to work through this. So when communities realize that I am not against them, that I'm for them, that I'm not just going to take the family side every time, that I'm trying to be this neutral third party in the middle, they're like, oh, okay, so you're actually helping us keep the residents. Yes, I don't want to move this resident unless we have to, unless there's a safety concern, their needs aren't being met, they're being neglected, then yes, let's try to work together on this. Meeting regularly with the communities, maybe quarterly meetings, to educate them on how we work and what we're doing in our community and what our background is about this bill and how we're trying to protect them. And just keeping that communication open and just reaching out periodically and just saying, hey, how is Mr. Jones doing? I know he moved in 2 months ago, just checking in. I know how the family feels, but how do you feel? Those kinds of things, just that next level of service and staying in the know with the family side and the community side.
That's a great point too, that your work doesn't stop the moment somebody moves in. A lot of times those relationships continue on. Sometimes you're the first person they call if something happens.
Exactly. Like, how should I handle this? I know the daughter's kind of, sensitive to this, or she's really busy or whatever. I'm like, great. Yeah. I mean, we probably know the family better, especially if it's a newer move-in, than you guys do. So yeah, use us as a resource, as a sounding board. Please do. Same with the family. Call us. If you have an issue with the community we moved your mom into, I need to know those things. So please, let's just have a dialogue and put it out there in the open.
I look at it just like the same as raising children. We say it takes a village. It's the same thing, I think, with caring for our elders as well. So
Absolutely.
I love that whole approach. Erin, thank you so much for this conversation. This is really important. I
Thank
love
you.
everything you're doing on the legislative side of things. We're definitely pulling for you guys, and I hope more states implement this because I think it's the only way forward
Me
for
too.
communities and for placement advisors to really be effective at what they do. Where can our audience go to learn more about Senior Care Authority St. Louis or connect with you directly?
Sure. They can go online to seniorcareauthority.com/St. Louis, so ST Louis, or they could call us directly at 314-451-2255.
Awesome. All right. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to thank you, Erin Dwyer Busch, for sharing your story and your fight, most of all, for fairness in senior care. From her clinical beginnings to her role in driving legislative change, Erin's work reminds us that placement isn't just about filling a room, it's about protecting families. It's about restoring trust and redefining how our industry connects with those we serve. So, if you'd like to connect with Erin or learn more about Senior Care Authority St. Louis, we've included her link in the show notes. As always, we hope you found this episode insightful and inspiring. Don't forget to subscribe to From Leads to Leases on your favorite platform and stay tuned for more conversations that are shaping the future of senior care. I'm Jerry Vinci, founder of CCR Growth. Thank you for joining us. And until next time, lead with strategy and with heart. Chat with you again soon. Thanks, Erin.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to From Leads to Leases. Are you ready to fill your rooms faster and increase occupancy? Visit ccrgrowth.com to learn about our Senior Growth Innovation Suite, a proven system to generate highly qualified, tour-ready leads, accelerate sales, and reduce acquisition costs. Let's connect and turn your challenges into opportunities. See you next time.